Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final edition of the week of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in. And to close out this week, we're going to be breaking up different segments about all college football player profiles. Yes, if you are interested in all my player profiles, have fallen in love with them, whether they be for NFL players, whether it be for IDP leagues, or now for college football, I want to present these players to you as many ways as possible, and I'm thankful that I get to do it because I really love these segments. But today we have a solid mix of Big 12 players and Big 10 players as well. Two conferences that have a lot to prove this year. New teams, new looks to them all due to conference realignment. And so all of these players have a perfect prime opportunity to present themselves to you as viable candidates to be chosen for your fantasy college football team. Before we get into any of those exciting segments, I do want to remind you to like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated by all. Also, we do receive a ton of tips and donations, so if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving them at the link gsmc.cloud. And in the future, I will be a live show, so this will change a little bit, where for YouTube purposes, you can go to the super chat, you can hit the chat box, get in the messages, and I will answer and address all of your messages to the show. It's all about you guys. I want your input. That's something I don't get with a pre-recorded show. I want your input in the future. So please do whatever you can to try and get your comments in if you so want to. But for now, gsmc.cloud is the link for anything other than that. But without further ado, let's jump right into today's show. And we start off with a quarterback who is going to be in the national spotlight always. And it's not just because of his father. And that's a huge giveaway as to who this is. Without further ado, let's jump right into the fantasy player profile of Mr. Shedeur Sanders. Now, Shedeur Sanders is someone who, in recent years, has really grown in popularity outside of the allure of what his father brings. He's really transcended what his father represented in football and is now becoming his own player. We saw it at Jackson State a little bit, where he truly wanted to make not just FCS football but HBCU football really stand out, and he did that, and he got the move to Colorado along with his father. And in his first year at Colorado, really brought it back into the national spotlight. Maybe not in a way that, really cemented them as a threat to compete in like the top 25 or anything of that matter. But by winning against TCU, by being competitive at the very least in most of their games in the Pac-12, now moving to the Big 12, where there are going to be a ton of shootouts because of the nature of the conference. It's very even. The parity is so well rounded in that vision. I think that Shedeur Sanders has a unique opportunity to really surprise people and play the role of spoiler as the Colorado QB. He, for many reasons, could be also a top 2025 NFL draft recruit. A lot of conversation about who is the number one quarterback in this class. Is it Carson Beck? Is it Shedeur Sanders? Is it Quinn Ewers? He has a chance in the Big 12 now to really try and cement his status, at least as one of the quarterbacks in the conversation to go number one overall. But without further ado, let's jump right into why he's such a polarizing figure in the sport of college football, and why he will always be polarizing no matter where he goes. His first season at Colorado, let's start off with 69 attempts, 3,323 yards, 27 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. But if you remember, most of that came behind a very shaky offensive line. Shedeur Sanders often had to work very much outside of structure, very seemingly uncomfortable with that offensive line in front of him. This year is an improved offensive line. His father, Deion Sanders, the coach of Colorado, blah, 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 blah. We can't sing his praises enough. Went out and improved that O-line for his son. And I think that it's a huge part of what Colorado believes they are building with Coach Prime, and for just the near future with his son, because this season truly is a pivotal year to really pull recruits into the allure of Colorado before Shedeur leaves for the NFL. Speaking of fantasy performances, let's jump into them. He was a mixed bag of all sorts last year. He had some good games against very stellar competition, but in others, I think the fact that Colorado just didn't have the talent to keep up with these teams really shined through. His best performance was against USC, 40.8 fantasy points, 30 for 45 passing, 371 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. But his worst was against Oregon, an eventual Pac-12 runner-up at 7 points, 23 of 33, 159 yards, 1 touchdown. But now, Shedeur Sanders doesn't really have to worry about playing any of those high-profile teams because he's in the Big 12 and they're in the Big 10. And what I love about the Big 12, like I said, growing up, watching the Big 12, whether I was a TCU fan or a Texas fan, don't ask me about the whole bandwagon situation. I saw entertaining football, end-to-end football, where these teams on any given Saturday could beat up on each other and no one really knew what to make of who would eventually be the champion of the conference. And so, when I think about Shedeur Sanders, right? And I think about the moxie he showed in the Pac-12, which I believe was better than the Big 12, exponentially better than the Big 12 last year. I think about what Shedeur Sanders brings not only in terms of culture and Colorado's team identity that it built last year, but it also brings to the table a team that a lot of people might not want to play or might be thinking about as the hunted. Colorado certainly does not have the best players in the conference. It certainly is not the best team in the conference, but it certainly is going to be the most sought-after win on people's schedules. Because Colorado, a lot of people seem to be preaching that they're doing the wrong thing in terms of bringing all these brands together. And what I mean by that is, I think that Shedeur Sanders really does bring a high profile to this team, but right now, I think that Colorado's at a point where it needs to start focusing on getting back into discussion of top college football playoff contenders. And right now, getting to the Big 12 is a huge step. It's a conference that gets you a lot more into the spotlight, whereas if you were a mediocre team in the Pac-12, then it's such a top-heavy conference that you get kind of tossed to the wayside. Last year, Colorado was able to kind of vault itself into the national radar with a couple of those wins. But in the Big 12, I think that they'll be more even. They have a feeling now of any given Saturday being a chance for them to win, an opportunity for them to usurp the big boys in the conference. And most importantly, Shedeur Sanders should now feel as if he's primed and ready for bigger things to come. Everything's coming up aces right now for Colorado and Shedeur Sanders. It's just about the opportunity of taking it and realizing that this team right now has the chance to finally get back to where they want to be. Let's talk about Shedeur Sanders. It's not just a football player, but a public figure, and how that might affect his production, his performances this season, and ultimately how people view Colorado. Shedeur Sanders, obviously it's kind of cliche to say that this is all nepotism because he's a very talented player. He's a very talented quarterback, and a lot of people eschew the side of him that's all centered around him and his father bonding through this team. If Shedeur Sanders focuses on just being an excellent player, a lot of people will be willing to forgive what Colorado becomes with such a public figure as Coach Prime heading the whole operation. Now, in terms of Big 12 play, you have to be a team that really wants to always play. And I think they have the players how to do it. I think they made some shrewd moves, especially in the wide receiver room. They acquired Will Shepard from Vanderbilt. I think that's an excellent addition. Really varies the wide receiver room. All these O-line players coming in, these young guys willing to play for Colorado. I think that a lot of people don't understand what it takes to really be a college football coach, let alone one who's already made a name for himself by being one of the most polarizing figures in the history of football. So I think Deion Sanders is realizing that he's balancing the focus of being a college football coach first and a dad second. And I think that's going to help Shedeur Sanders really grow and be his own player, his own person, and ultimately make Colorado someone to be reckoned with, because that's what the Big 12 is all about. It's about teams just constantly beating up on each other with the optimistic hopes of getting to this Big 12 championship, because there's always a wide open field. And this year's more wide open than ever. I look at all the teams there, and they certainly are kind of in the mid to last tier of Big 12 teams, in my humble opinion. I don't see a path for them that truly would get them to the spot where, hey, these guys are actually a force to be reckoned with this year. It will take at least 3 to 5 years to try and fully rebuild this program, set a solid foundation for it for years to come, even after Coach Prime leaves, when he does. I think that Colorado right now, this season, is all about Shedeur playing well and ultimately keeping a culture that isn't quote-unquote the wrong thing, but that players and recruits will be appealed by but won't be distracted by. And so that's the ultimate goal. I think Shedeur Sanders is doing very well for himself. In terms of fantasy, I think that in the Big 12, it's just a whole crapshoot, so who knows how well he'll play any given week. But I think that his style of play truly kind of gravitates towards the Big 12 more than it did for the Pac-12, where he was playing catch-up. So look out for Shedeur Sanders in fantasy college football drafts. And so I think Shedeur Sanders, I think that he's going to be an excellent player this year and beyond. Let's just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we go to another quarterback coming back from injury and going to the Big 12. Already a star, a well-respected guy in college football. We'll be right back to talk about him after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign.